video I want to talk about using Twill as a combat uniform instead of something like ripstop. So this is not something that you're going to see very often, except for maybe in something like these old BDUs, the old woodland BDUs, or maybe the 6-color chocolate chip pattern, or MARPAT. The MARPAT woodland and desert are made of a twill, a polycotton twill. So basically, I kind of wanted to talk about, what does twill offer, what is good, what's bad. So in my experience, twill does a few things right. Number one, the big thing that it does is it reduces or it prevents wear, because if you actually look at the structure of this weave, basically what's happening is it is all really tightly woven together. It allows the actual threads to be a lot thicker, and they're able to be woven a lot tighter. So this allows it to basically be a bit stronger, but it also makes it a little bit heavier because obviously you're adding more material. It's just more tightly woven together, and it's not just like a standard weave like with ripstop, where you basically get a standard weave and then you get ripstop material where it's basically thicker threads to prevent a small rip from basically progressing. Now with polycotton or Nico twill, you're basically getting a very thick material, thick yarn from the outset, or threads if you will, and it prevents tears from forming in the first place, or holes. It's a little bit more durable. And case in point right here, this is an area on this old woodland BDU. This is the temperate climate BDU, but you can see how it kind of frays here. And this uniform actually had been balled up and just thrown down into my crawl space. And that's the other thing about twill, is unlike a ripstop material or other kinds of weaves, this prevents wrinkling. So you don't really need to sit there and iron out your clothing, and it doesn't look like a bag of ass, really. Also, this uniform right here, this was balled up too. This was tightly balled up in one of my old sea bags, and this is one of the ones that I wore in the rear. This is one of my old deserts. And the other thing about twill is it can typically hold color a lot better, and it's abrasion resistant and tear resistant just because of how tightly woven it is. It holds on to the color a lot better from my experience. And case in point, again, is if you look here, let's just do a little comparison here. This is one of my really old uniforms here. So this is the dark browns, and these are some dark browns right here, what used to be. This thing was exposed to the sun all the time. The top portions here, the more top portions here were covered by body armor, and the bottom portions here obviously just were basically exposed. So you had the little tail flaps here that were exposed to the sun, but yeah, the friction and the sun exposure and just getting dirty, and the abrasion did obviously scrub away some of the colors, but it took a long time to do it. So if you look at something like a ripstop or whatever, the material will thin out, it'll start fraying. And the good thing about this twill is basically it holds on to the colors a lot better, and it prevents a lot of tearing from abrasion and stuff like that, and just rips in general. So that's one of the good things about twill. However, obviously it's tightly woven together. That's basically what it is. If you look at the threads on a small level, they're tightly woven together threads, and they're very thick in comparison to something like the weaves that you'll see in a ripstop material, because the ripstop is supposed to kind of give it a bit of structural integrity. This is a different way of going about it. However, you can have holes put in. I was a smoker when I was in, so here is a cigarette burn right here. and one of the cherries actually went through and burned right here. So yeah, you can see that it's nice and tightly woven together, and there's just a lot of material. Even though it doesn't look like much, if you actually try to tear this, the structure is just very solid, so it doesn't really allow tearing. I think it actually resists tearing a lot better than ripstop does, just because of how tightly woven together everything is, and you have to break a lot of tiny threads together. You have to break a lot of tiny threads in order to get to start tearing, so not too easy to do in my experience. So yeah, I do like twill. You're not going to really find that many new uniforms that are going to use a twill pattern. And also, here is a woodland, one of my old covers from when I was in. This thing was exposed to the North Carolina sun a lot, and the East Coast sun. It's held its color pretty well, and again, twill actually holds its color pretty well, except up here you'll see a little bit of fading. It takes a while for it to fade, so that's always good, and it resists abrasion very well. But you're not going to see that many uniforms, like new uniforms from companies like True Spec or whatever, that are going to be in twill. True Spec does produce some, but for the most part, you're not going to see it being all that popular. However, if you're wanting something that holds the color a lot better and also has basically the same integrity, same durability as a ripstop material, a pretty thick ripstop material, then I would go with a twill. There is the company Helicon Tex. It's a Polish company, and they actually produce their pants and some of their uniforms in a twill. And I think that it's a better way to go if you're trying to keep the color on and also reduce wear to the point that you're not really getting tears and you're not really getting wrinkles, so you keep a good professional look. It's very durable, so it prevents tears from happening in the first place and resists abrasion, very well altogether. So anyways, there's really not much else to say except for some of the older patterns, older desert patterns, like the 6-color chocolate chip. They were said to be a lot heavier, and they kind of are. It's pretty thick material. However, from my experience in wearing things like that, this being a twill and it actually being relatively heavy compared to other uniforms, I don't see twill as actually being a harsh thing in the desert. From my experience being in the Afghan winter and the Afghan summer, it actually insulates for the cold and the heat very well. For whatever reason, I don't know why, but it just seems to do that very well. It insulates you in cold weather, and it insulates you against the hot weather. So, yeah, from my experience, twill just worked good all around. And the other thing is, when it does get wet, depending on the material, it can dry out pretty easily, or you can wring it out without having to worry about wrinkles and stuff. It doesn't fade easily when washed. It's just a good all-around construction, in my opinion, and that's probably why the Marine Corps went with it. They kind of realized that that's actually a pretty good way to go. But anyways, that's my little information on twill and my experience with twill for a combat uniform. And if you're going to use it for like a pant or something like that, I mean, denim jeans typically use a twill. They're very tough. It's a very tough construction. You don't see them really using ripstop. You don't need to. You get good durability out of twill. So, don't kind of set it to the sideline just because you think that all military uniforms have to be some kind of ripstop material. They don't. I would actually say that twill would probably be the better way to go for overall durability. But anyways, go ahead and put your comments down below with your experience with this stuff. I know I got a few Marines following this channel. I would love to see your input on how you guys kind of saw these uniforms and this construction working in the desert. Some of you guys are old salt dogs who were around during Desert Storm and probably had some experience recently with these uniforms and others, so you probably saw Ripstop and Twill uniform experience. So go ahead and put that input down below if you can, and if any of you guys have experience, go ahead and put that down for everybody to see. And give this video a like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys around in another video. You guys have a good one.